Welcome to the Money Mastermind Show. Let's talk money.
And welcome to the Money Mastermind Show. So tonight, we're going to have some fun here, and we're going to talk about a lot of the personal finance books that we ourselves loved and maybe kind of got us into this, and that we maybe go back to a bunch of times, and why we like these books. There are tons of these books out there now. When I started fixing up my finances, there wasn't too many good sources. I mean, if you went to maybe a Barnes & Nobles and looked at the finance area, there was a lot there, but there were only a handful that were really the more popular ones. But nowadays, they come out like every day, and they all have great information for the most part, right? But they're not all the ones that you need to have, right? They're not the life changers always. So we're going to maybe get a little personal here and talk about the ones that really meant something to us or that we really enjoy. So let's get to introductions here. We have Kyle Prevost of youngandthrifty.ca, Miranda Marquette of Planting Money Seeds, Peter Anderson of Bible Money Matters, Tom Drake of the Canadian Finance Blog, and I'm Glenn Craig of Free From Broke. So, PF books, personal finance books. Where do we start? What's good?
Well, I think we should start with More Money for Beer and Textbooks, of course.
There's only one place to start.
Somebody hold it up. I know somebody has that.
Come on, Kyle. Where is it?
Here, I'll hold it up for Kyle. So, the book Tom's holding up, More Money for Beer and Textbooks, I'll give it a quick plug. It is the book that myself, my co-author Justin Bouchard penned. We like to think it's all right. It is written definitely for a Canadian slant, not that an American student can't get anything out of it, but it is using Canadian-specific terms at certain points. We refer to Canadian-specific beer brands, if that's your thing. Basically, if you or your child are going to be attending university or college anytime soon, pick up a copy. And now we'll get on to more important things.
Well, I mean, really, more money for beer and textbooks. What's more important than that? More money.
What else is there?
Nothing is more important.
But to be fair, you wrote that book. It wasn't a book that maybe influenced you to get into this realm.
Correct.
Right? So let's talk about some books like that maybe when we started off, we didn't know what we were doing or we just wanted some guidance. What books influenced you?
For me, it's kind of a Canadian thing, really. But The Wealthy Barber, he might have made an American version as well, I think. But David Chilton has The Wealthy Barber. I've got The Wealthy Barber Returns right here. But basically, it's written like a fiction novel. So it was the first thing I ever read that got me into personal finance because it was just such an easy read and it doesn't feel like you're reading a textbook on personal finance.
What was it about it that made it so easy?
Well, just the novel style of it. Once you're reading it, you're literally just following the story of a few different people in the book, and within that's all these different money tips about saving money, investing, and all that. But so by the time you've done the book, you've kind of covered a lot of ground, but it just doesn't come off the same way if you're someone just getting into it.
Yeah, that is the thing about a lot of personal finance books is that they're a little dry and formulaic, and through no fault of the authors, and sometimes the subject itself is pretty dry. We're talking about savings accounts or credit cards and life insurance and all that stuff. It's not always the most fun thing in the world, and I think that's where a lot of books, they're just telling you what to do. So if you could find a book like that is at least a little entertaining on top of that, then that's a huge bonus. I know for me, one book in the beginning, at least, kind of opened my eyes to looking at my money and how I looked at my money and where it was coming from, where it was going. And this book gets a lot of flack both ways, is Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. I remember looking at that, and it kind of made me think about what a salary really is, who's making that money, where my money's earning money, what owning a home really means, things like that. And in that sense, it was pretty influential in really taking a deep look into my finances.
Yeah, so I'm not a huge Robert Kiyosaki fan, but like you with the Rich Dad, Poor Dad thing, when I first read that, the idea of, the mortgage and how the home that you live in is not, in fact, an investment, just like, because really, when you're growing up, when you're starting out, when you're getting ready to do this stuff, really, everybody tells you, oh, your home is an investment. Oh, you have to buy a home. Oh, it's this huge, important milestone. And I'm talking to a bunch of homeowners, but but yeah, when I read that book, and it was just before my then husband was like, oh, we've got to buy a house, and I'm reading this book and I'm going, no, we don't. But it was just really interesting the way, I know that he's really big into real estate and that's the way he likes to tell people to make money. But it did really make me take a step back and say, okay, let's talk about what a mortgage really is and what it really means in your life and how to start really thinking about the house that you live in.
Yeah, I echo Miranda's sentiments that I'm not a Kiyosaki acolyte, but I remember reading that book and him making a very specific difference between how most people, like his poor dad, quote unquote, looked at money, and how wealthy people tend to look at money. And I readily sort of was able to slot my own upbringing into the one category and say, this is why these things happen. And it's true by and large, despite whatever else you think about the man. He put a convincing argument together for why wealthy people build assets and others don't.
Yeah, I mean, I think he gets a lot of flack in that he tells you to do certain things, and then, like, once you read the book, you're like, this is great. Wait a minute, how do I get into this, like, real estate buying thing? Like, wait, huh? But,
well,
I have to go to his seminars, and I have to buy all these other books.
If you pay $10,000, you can go to his master class.
Let's just move on.
But yeah, you know what?
Let's go to the next one.
That's the thing about some of these books. Some of these books have some good information and maybe some that's not as good. But the key is to take these books and glean from them what you can. One book that affected my life when I was first getting into personal finance was the Total Money Makeover by Dave Ramsey.
Oh, I have that back there.
That's one that's probably a lot of people have heard of, but for us, it just kind of got us thinking about our finances, actually thinking about the importance of tracking our money at our household, making sure every dollar that came into the house was being assigned to, a saving, giving, or expense category. Helped us to set up a zero-based budget at our house, and it also does a good job of talking about debt and the dangers of debt and getting out of debt. That's one of the things he really excels at, thinking about the dangers of debt and how to get out of it and how to start building wealth. I think a lot of people have issues with, once he starts talking about how to build that wealth, he may not be the ideal person to look to as far as investing and wealth creation and stuff like that. But for thinking about your finances, starting a budget, getting out of debt, all those sorts of things, I think it actually is a pretty decent read.
Yeah, it's not bad. I remember when we had Joe Saul-Sehy on, and he was talking about, following gurus for where you're at in your finances. And I think that that's something to think about when you were talking about, like, the books and taking what you can from them. Look at where you're at in your finances and figure out who speaks to you and where you're at, and kind of, because he talks about graduating from financial guru to financial guru. And yeah, and my big problem with Dave Ramsey, of course, is he would have told me not to finance my car and put my credit cards away. So
back to those credit cards. Yeah.
Back to those credit cards, man.
Yeah, but I think like you were talking about, Dave Ramsey, he's a good person to read when you're at the beginning of the process. You're just starting out, and maybe you've got a bunch of debt to get rid of. Once you move beyond that, you can move on to something else, like Millionaire Next Door with Thomas Stanley. Talking more about becoming a millionaire, what millionaires do, what attributes you need to have, and things you need to do in order to create wealth.
Yeah, I second that motion. That book also is on my list. It really gives you an eye-opener in that, this whole keeping up with the Joneses thing, it's not going to get you wealthy, and that the guy that you think with the beat-up Pinto, maybe he's got more going on than you think. He might be the one who's well on his way to 6, 7, 8 figures, and not the guy with the brand new Lexus next door.
Sorry, Kyle in his van.
Yeah, yeah, all those Toyota Corolla millionaires. I should be a multi-millionaire at the rate I'm going here. But one book that I really liked, who skipped the vehicle altogether, he's a good friend of the show, Andrew Hallam, and it's The Millionaire Teacher. And obviously, I would like that for obvious reasons, but it's a pretty cool story. Where he was a Canadian teacher. He's since traveled all over the world, and he's written an American-based book, but just basic index investing and I would say extreme frugality. I think Andrew at the beginning would classify himself as extreme, where he was eating on like $2 a day at the beginning. But just the process on, like, if you say you can't do it at whatever your salary is, he was earning a pretty modest salary at the time in one of Canada's sort of most expensive places to live, and managed to become a millionaire at a fairly young age. So it's just puts into theory or puts into practice a lot of the investing theories that I'm sure will be in a lot of the books that we talk about here tonight. But it's a good starting point for someone who's ready to take things seriously.
And along with that, one of my favorite books it's called The Oblivious Investor, and it was one of the first of many books written by Mike Piper. But it's what got me into indexing. It's what got me into really starting investing, other than the horrible IRA that my insurance agent got me into. And so, but yeah, the Oblivious Investing. It's a really great book, a really great read by Mike Piper, and it's a really good one just to get you familiar with the idea of index investing and indexing and just getting started on a really basic level. So it's one of my favorite books. Easy read. It's like 100 pages or something.
Yeah, that's what I like about Mike. I mean, he's a really bright guy. I've met him. I've talked to him. And his books aren't like these big bloated things. It's like you get to the point, and he's got a whole series of different books on different subjects too. So, go on Amazon and take a look at, what fits your need. But he really gets to the point and helps you out to learn the subject.
Oh, yeah, and that's what I love about it. He's just like straightforward. He's like, this is what we're going to do, and we're going to do it this way.
Similar to Miranda, I had a see the light moment about investing when I read the Little Book of Common Sense Investing by John Bogle. I had a terrible mutual fund from the bank, and then I thought I was doing the right thing, and once I read that book, I totally changed my mind and went all with index funds.
Similar to that, I've read the Boglehead's Guide to Investing. Yeah. Which isn't necessarily his. It's kind of more his forum with his input in there, I believe. But it's basically all his theories on investing and what you need to be doing. It's easy to start investing and you start buying all sorts of things thinking that you're going to get rich, but it's not necessarily that complex. There's easy ways to go about it.
Well, and the great thing about reading John Bogle is, I mean, the guy invented the index fund, right? So might as well go straight to the horse's mouth and get the information.
Exactly.
Named one of the world's most influential people in 2004 by Time, and was one of the 4 giants of the investing industry in the 20th century by Fortune. So, yeah.
Good enough.
Another book that was on my list was one of the first ones I read when I first started writing about personal finance. Was called The Richest Man in Babylon.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a book that was written in the 1920s, but it has a lot of insightful things to say about saving, investing, and simple ideas behind wealth creation. And it's kind of written in the vein of parables or stories, and it really just kind of gets to the root of the ideas behind wealth creation. Making sure you're seeking out the wisdom of those who know and who have experienced success, paying yourself first, the law of compounding returns, and you won't miss the money if you pay yourself first. Things like those simple ideas that are done in story and parable form. That it really kind of is very, very entertaining read.
And that book, is that in the public domain already?
It may be, yeah. I think it is.
I mean, if you can't find a free copy somewhere, it's like relatively inexpensive on like Kindle or something like that.
Yeah, I think I found it on public domain, Google Books or something like that. But
right. So I mean, that's a nice way to get started. Let's get started frugally. Spend maybe $1.
That's right. So another one that I like, and I have here, is called The Millionaire Fast Lane. by M.J. DeMarco. And I really like this one because he talks about how basically doing what like is normal in our lives, what the normal thing is. Basically you work, right? You work for 40 or 50 years and then you're old and sad, and now you retire, but you're old and sad and you can't enjoy anything. And so I just really kind of like that, just because he says on the back, this is kind of fun, he says, why prostitute your Monday through Friday for the paycheck of a weekend? And and that's why I got this book, because I was like reading the back of it and I was like, oh. So yeah, and there's a lot of stuff in here that kind of I don't really agree with per se, but it was really kind of interesting in terms of just looking at it in terms of all of the people that are telling you how to get rich. They didn't get rich by following their own advice. They got rich because they went out and started this empire telling other people how to get rich. And so it was just kind of interesting to read, and it's just kind of a different way to look at it, and it's just kind of fun. I really enjoyed it.
It's a good book, like if you're looking to maybe start a business or come up with some kind of business idea, like what is this going to do? How is it going to generate money? And I think he talks about like trying to live like the 401k lifestyle, and it's really not going to do much for you. But if you have something that could generate money, right? Yeah. But yeah, it was really good. So another one that I read, I had gotten, I think from another website, they had a giveaway, but it really did hit me though. It was Your Money or Your Life. And in that book, it really talked about how, like, the value of your time and what that means, and that really got it to me. Like everything that you buy has some sort of it transfers to the work that you're doing. You buy that new TV, well, now you have to work X amount of hours to justify that, and it definitely gives you like a way to look at your purchases and what you're doing and putting a value to it that I think a lot of us don't normally do.
Yeah, well, and that one really helped me kind of keep moving. Like reading that book really helps me look at things and just say, okay, yeah, so what is important to me? What do I want to spend my money on? And just kind of rearrange how I did things. It was a really good one to help me figure out my priorities and realize that a lot of the things I was spending my money on I didn't care about.
Mm-hmm. So it's interesting, we have these different sort of categories. We have some like basic PDF ones, and we have some that kind of go more into the business realm and some into the investing realm. And I think it's important to note that, like I think somebody had said, some books are maybe better for you depending on where you are, and what you're doing. So it's important to keep that in mind. I know at one point I was just going a little crazy and just trying to read everything in the beginning and get my head around anything. And I was reading books by Peter Lynch and books about Warren Buffett. Like I wanted to know everything about investing. And I can't remember. Maybe it was One Up on Wall Street from Peter Lynch. I forget. But I remember reading these books and going, this is just so way over my head. Especially with Warren Buffett and discount prices and all sorts of different things. But what was interesting was in both of those, it was the idea of if you're going to invest in a company, know what they do, like get your head around it, or like in Peter Lynch's case, if there's something that you use that you love or a store that you're always going to, maybe that's a place to start if you want to look to invest in something. Like why are they successful, and then you could kind of go down that road and see what's going on, rather than trying to randomly invest in things, or because your Uncle Joe says to invest in something. Like at least you have something kind of personally invested in why you want to do it and why you understand it.
Well, and I think another good book, if you want to start going the value investing route and do the whole stock picking thing, is The Intelligent Investor, Benjamin Graham. It's a great classic. It's been updated recently by Jason. I'm not going to try and pronounce his last name, from the Wall Street Journal. And
Zweig.
Yeah. And that's a great one if you want to start value investing. But one thing that really struck me is that a couple of weeks ago, Warren Buffett was talking about how, part of the reason why he's so successful is because he had the resources to buy to really do this stuff. You were talking about Warren Buffett. And he had all these resources, and he said if he was a regular person, if basically he was just saying if he was somebody who, was working for a living or whatever, he said that the best thing you can do is index and put index funds in your retirement account. And so, we don't need to get hung up and say, oh, well, let's try and invest like Warren Buffett. Well, we can't invest like Warren Buffett because we didn't have a dad who had a successful business who gave us a large chunk of money to deal with. And
we're just not him. Even if you built it up from the beginning, not everybody is this super investor or whatever that has the time or the inclination to really dig deep into a lot of companies and funds. Sometimes we got to take a simpler route just because, hey, look, we got to look at things realistically.
Another one of the sort of deeper investment books that hasn't been mentioned yet is The Four Pillars of Investing.
Ah, yes.
William Bernstein. It was how we talked about graduating books. After I read the John Bogle book, reading this one just felt like I was going so much more into it. I don't think it went too crazy. I didn't feel over my head, but like some of the ones that are out there. But it made me feel more confident about understanding how things work.
If you're looking for something newer with a little bit of snark and sarcasm and pop culture references, a guy that I've met and talked to and really liked, Robert Brown, Wealthing Like Rabbits. It started in Canada, but he's since released an American version. It's a great name. Once again, that's Wealthing Like Rabbits. And there's no information in it that's going to trump the books that we just talked about, but if you're looking for a quick read, something feel-good with Star Wars references and obvious metaphors to the reproduction rates of rabbits, give Robert Brown a try. It reaches some people that have a hard time connecting with this stuff. So maybe something to recommend to your friend or your brother that maybe isn't as into personal finance as you are.
Another author that may be more accessible for a lot of people, just average folks, is David Bach. Mm-hmm. He's got a whole series of books, but Automatic Millionaire is one of the ones that a lot of people have heard of, and it kind of goes into how to create wealth. As far as it's not all about just doing a budget and stuff like that, but it's about setting in place systems and automatic systems in order to automate your investments and your saving and all that type of thing. So. It's a good book, I think, for people just starting out as well.
Huh.
Jumping off the systems theme, like if you ever own your own business or you plan on having a business, I highly recommend reading the E-Myth. And he talks there about if you own a business, you really need to put these systems in place so that the business can manage itself, so that you have the freedom to do what you want to grow the business as opposed to being stuck in all the minutia, which happens to a lot of people.
Yeah, that's a good one. And then another one that a lot of people like and that I really enjoyed and kind of also along with Your Money or Your Life kind of helped me rethink my lifestyle and how I do things was the 4-hour work week by Tim Ferriss. Just because I liked the idea of why don't you sit down, figure out what you want your life to... Yay! Why don't you sit down...
We don't do anything for that, but...
Yeah. But why don't you sit down, think about what you want your life to look like, and then figure out what you need to do to make it happen. And that was pretty much what I got out of that. There were a lot of things in there that I was just like, no. But one of the great things I took from that was, here, figure out what you want to look like, and then start using your resources and trying to figure out where you want to go and make that happen.
I think that's one of those books where not everything he says will apply to you. Not everybody's going to go and build a business like he does, but it sometimes it's the idea of the book. Like that whole idea of the book is, there might be an easier way. Maybe I'm working too hard. How can I hack this out? How can I find some sort of shortcut that'll make a lot of this easier? And maybe that's a theme for a lot of this stuff, right? Because we want to make personal finance easier. And if you can make it a little less effort, a little less thinking, a little less money to put up front, then you're ahead of the game.
How about another book from a friend of the show, Todd Tressiter, How Much Money Do I Need to Retire? That's an interesting book if you're thinking about, how much money do I need to save in order to reach my goals in retirement and topics like that. So that's definitely one I think I would recommend, and check out one of our podcasts with him where he talks about that topic.
Definitely.
And while we're giving shout outs to people, let's not forget about Carl Richards. Because his book, The Behavior Gap, was just really interesting, and the one-page financial plan as well. But both of those are pretty good as well.
One book I liked, it didn't really help personal finance-wise. It doesn't tell you necessarily what to do, but it sort of has this whole Wizard of Oz sort of behind the curtains sort of deal, is Liar's Poker by Michael Lewis.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, like, again, it won't tell you how to invest, but it sort of tells you what goes on in Wall Street, and it gives you a little bit of caution as to why they do the things they do. When you get that call from a broker, should you ever be so lucky? Maybe not. But, they're doing it for a reason because they want to make a commission. They're not doing it necessarily for your best interests. When people are trying to sell you something, it's probably because they have some kind of financial interest in it. And it's just very interesting historic-wise, too, because what happens in that book seems to have ripples that last until this day.
Yeah, and while we're talking about Michael Lewis, hey, The Big Short, that was a fun read.
Or Moneyball, but I mean...
Or Moneyball, yeah, if you like sports.
Well, to me, Moneyball it also looks at it a little bit like the 4-hour work week.
Yeah.
The way in there, it's more the idea than the actual thing. I mean, none of us here are going to go out and buy the athletics and try to build a team. But the idea behind that, though, is just because somebody says this is the way to do it for so long doesn't necessarily mean that's the case, and doesn't mean it's the most efficient. It's okay to sometimes look around and say, you know what, something's wrong here. The emperor has no clothes. How can I make this better? So what other books do we have out there?
So one of my absolute favorite books is a satire. It's by Terry Pratchett, and it's called Making Money. And it's another one of those kind of behind the curtain types of stories, and it's one where he just talks about this guy who becomes he's become the banker, the royal banker, and he's supposed to figure out how to make the bank solvent and figure out economics. And he's like, we are done with gold, we are moving. It's just a really funny book, and you're reading it, and then you look at the published date and realize that it was published before the financial crash, but you're reading it and you're going, oh my gosh. And it's just a fun satire. It's just a fun look at money. It's just a fun way to just sort of upend the way you look at it, and it's just an interesting and fun satire.
And
if I could,
reading fun.
If I could take it a little off track, one book that it made a big difference for me, and it's certainly only Canadian, but I'm sure there's American similarities. Make sure it's deductible. It's by Evelyn Jacks. It's a tax book, but reading that made me start my business. Just the idea that I can start a business, I'll get all these tax perks and see how it works out. Like Glenn, you mentioned E-Myth, like something more entrepreneurially motivating. but for me, it was just this idea of the process of starting a business and taking advantage of the different tax systems in place, and that was a big part of it for me.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't realize that there's a lot of behind the curtains reasons why businesses get started and why they get to be as wealthy as they do. There's all these advantages that the layperson isn't privy to necessarily.
If you're looking for an interesting book on somebody who is the ultimate entrepreneur, I just recently read a book called The First Tycoon, The Epic Life of Cornelius Vanderbilt. And it goes into this guy's life. I mean, a lot of us have heard of him before, but a lot of us really don't know his story. And it's just pretty crazy how he started from just a young man with a boat, running boat trips in Manhattan. And he went from there to become, the richest man in the United States and a railroad tycoon and all this. So he's the ultimate entrepreneur. Definitely a kind of a cool book to check out for anybody interested in that sort of thing.
Yeah, a lot of those turn-of-the-century guys that made so much money, they're all interesting in how a lot of them just kind of came from nothing and just like really kind of forced their way in to become some of the most influential people in the country, for sure.
It also helps when you don't pay your workers and make them live in shanty towns and have horrible conditions.
Yes,
that's
That-
the way it was.
That helps.
But
different
that's
time.
part of what's interesting about it too, because a lot of these people kind of they have this like glazed over sort of history where you remember the museums and the houses and the funds and everything that they're named after, but that was a lot of whitewashing after the fact for a lot of these people.
We're going to pay you crap wages. We're going to force you to live in this town, and you're going to pay the wages that you make. You have to spend it at the company store because we're only going to pay you in company script. We're just going to step down, back away.
That's so
Go read the jungle. Okay, backing away.
Well, the history of it all can be fun too, and I think that's important too, and that's why like books like Liar's Poker and such, they're good. It's good to get your head around why things happen too, not just what exactly you need to do, because then you get a feel for the economy at large and why things happen now, why that has an effect on different things too. So sometimes seeing what they do, it gives you just a different view on what's going on. So I think we've thrown out like a good solid library's worth of books out there to check out, and I think we could probably come up with 100 more if we really wanted to. I know we have a lot of friends out there that have written excellent books, and it's hard to get out there and mention every one of them. Maybe we could try to put that up on our page. When we do, we'll maybe set up some sort of resource for different books that are out there. But let's go around and maybe give a final word on some PF books out there. So Tom, what's your final word on favorite PF books?
Yeah, on our show notes, we're going to have a whole list of books with affiliate links and everything. But my number one recommendation for this is get a library card, and then you can read all these books for free, or at least the cost of the library card, depending on your city. And that's how I did it. Like some of my favorite books, I don't have a copy because when I first started reading, everything I was doing was from the library.
That's a great point. If you're looking to save money, you don't have to go out and spend $25 on a book. You can start off and do it for free.
Yeah, don't be intimidated by this big list of books we've just gone through.
Right, and just to go back off before we jump back into the final word, maybe my final word, but find the books that work for you. What is your need, and find the book that really matches where you are in your finances. So Peter, what's your final word?
I'll just end it with a quote from The Richest Man in Babylon. Wealth like a tree grows from a tiny seed. The first copper you save is the seed from which your tree of wealth shall grow. The sooner you plant that seed, the sooner shall the tree grow. And by the same token, planting that tiny seed of knowledge by getting into these books, start today. Just find one of these books and learn a little bit more about your finances, about money, and it'll just grow from there. You'll find more and more books, and you'll learn more and more as you go. So there you go.
That's deep.
Planting money seeds. Cool.
Yeah.
What's the saying? The best time to plant the tree was yesterday, or something like that.
20 years ago.
Let's just keep going on that.
Second best time.
Anyway, Miranda, go ahead. What's your final word?
Just to kind of echo what's been said, go get a book. Go learn a little bit more about money. Go learn about how money works. I think one of the most important things you can do with a lot of these books is not so much the strategy as it is learning how money works and the way it operates and how it can operate in your life. And that's the most valuable thing you can get out of most of these books.
And Kyle, what's your final word?
I'm going to give a quick shout out to two Canadian specific books, The Value of Simple by John Robertson and Stop Overthinking Your Money by Preet Banerjee. And the one thing I really like about these two is they are very logistics oriented. It's not theory. They're not trying to convince you. Hopefully you've been convinced by the time you get there. They're going to give you a few practical steps to follow and how to actually get from A to Z.
Awesome. And you just reminded me of Ramit Sethi's I Will Teach You to Be Rich, which has like lots of like scripts and how to like just save money, call up these carriers and say, this is what I need you to do, and this is what you're going to set it up as, and I'm going to save money now. So there's another one to take a look at. So we really went through a lot, if you're out there listening and you don't have a place to start, you haven't been paying attention. When this goes up, shoot us in the comments your favorite and which ones you like. So we definitely want to know, because I'm sure we've missed plenty, and there are plenty out there. And until next week, be good with your money.
Thanks for joining us on the Money Mastermind Show. Get more information at moneymastermindshow.com. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on iTunes and YouTube, and follow us on Google+.